On May 24th of this year, this committee instructed Building and Safety, CAO, CLA, and Planning to answer 3 specific questions. The first question was the city's current enforcement strategies for off-site signs and as well a fully staffed enforcement program. The second question was policy options that would allow off-site signs outside of sign districts. And the third directive was an updated fee schedule. So to summarize the report, and to be clear about the intent of the report does not provide any recommendations. What's enumerated in the report are various options, and ultimately the decisions that this committee and the council takes, those are public policy decisions of the council. So the options that are enumerated in the report are, 1, a relocation agreement ordinance that it would include different ratios. And let me be clear, there's some confusion as to the wording of the report. On the first page, it denoted an 8-to-1 sign reduction ratio, meaning for every 8 square feet of static signs, you would trade it off for 1 square footage of digital sign. This should not be interpreted as a recommendation or the sole option enumerated in the report. The report, in fact, contains an attachment, and the attachment delineates the various scenarios. For example, an 8-to-1 ratio, a 6-to-1 ratio, and a 4-to-1 ratio. So just to be clear, the report does not recommend a specific ratio. So the number 1 option, again, in the report is a ratio that would allow a trade-off from static signs to digital sign on a square footage criteria. The second option, enumerated in the report, is the development of the necessary distance, land use, and zoning restrictions. And again, on May 19th of this year, in our prior report, that report delineated minimum standards for your committee to consider. And in fact, the report prohibited off-site signage on certain areas of the city. It also protected certain types of homes that we classified as sensitive uses, such as single-family zones, scenic overlays, and state or national parks. So the third option in the report is the development of a framework that would establish the total number of relocated off-site signs and non-relocated signs. The fourth option that we recommend is an inventory of city-owned properties wherein off-site signage could be located. Obviously, this would need to be mapped out, and we would need the assistance of possibly the General Services Department and the Planning Department to find out what those city-owned properties are and their location. The fifth option is a requirement that project applicants that are seeking to file a relocation agreement, that they submit an economic analysis report. And that report, or the consultant rather, would be someone that would be pre-selected by the Planning Department. The Planning Department has a listing of consultants that can be tapped into, and that would be a fifth option. The sixth option would be an ordinance that would incorporate changes to the existing off-site sign periodic inspection program. Currently, there's individuals in that division that conduct inspections. The report provides an option of 2 additional bodies that would be dedicated for inspection on an annual basis rather than a biannual basis as it currently exists. And Building and Safety has requested 2 additional building mechanical inspectors. So This provides a brief synopsis of the intent of the report and to clarify that these are options and ultimately the decision of what to do. It's a public policy decision of this committee and the council. Building and safety is here in attendance, and they can describe the enforcement plan that they're proposing and the need for the additional position authorities. And the CAO can get into issues of revenue sharing and anything dealing with fees and whatnot, and their representatives are here, as well as representatives from the planning department who can provide technical information as well.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mejia, for that report, and we will hear from them soon, and thank you for giving us an overview of the report. It came out Friday, so I hope those who are interested on this item have had a chance to review it. Let me, before we bring up the other departments, I'd like to begin by reiterating the policy goals that this committee has identified over the past several months in our effort to develop a balanced framework moving forward. This committee has established over the course of over several meetings and ongoing discussions that there are key outcomes we are seeking to achieve with this ordinance. First is a comprehensive citywide takedown of existing signs. That's one of our top priorities. And we must create a system that facilitates the takedown of signs across all areas of the city and does not predicate certain areas over others in its actual application. We also, as Mr. Mejia stated, are interested on enhanced enforcement. It is clear that an enhanced enforcement program needs to be developed to address the number of existing unpermitted signs. At previous meetings of this committee, we have heard that there is a defined list of signs without known permits. It is a priority to make sure that those signs come down. And we need to establish a mechanism for ensuring that the city can appropriately benefit from signs through revenue sharing as a means to fund citywide initiatives. The last time this committee heard this issue, we received reports back on several components. We have heard from the planning department on potential land use standards to support enforcement and reduction in targeted areas. We heard for perhaps the first time about what the city currently collects in fees for the thousands of existing signs and examples of how other cities have been approaching this matter. And on this item, we will now, in today's meeting, hear more specifically from the Building and Safety Department on enforcement. So I'd like to invite staff from Building and Safety to present on that portion. Welcome.
Good afternoon, council members, staff. Chief Inspector Frank Lara with the Department of Building and Safety. I supervise the sign division for the department. So our department has operated our off-site sign periodic inspection program since 2008. This program is designed to conduct an inspection of each off-site sign structure in the city, and we have been cataloging both the location, the characteristics of the sign, for instance, height, size, number of faces, so forth. We've been cataloging this data in our database, and we've been providing this information to the public through our website. Initially, this program and the fee that we were to charge for this program covered our staff of 3 inspectors for this process of conducting the inspections, cataloging, inventory. There really wasn't money that was adequate to provide an enforcement function of issuing orders, conducting those additional inspections, packaging, for instance, criminal complaints to go to the city's attorney office. That's all very time consuming, and the fee that was incorporated into the ordinance really didn't cover that kind of an effort. So, but we've gone 2 complete cycles. I'm almost certain that we've identified every billboard in the city, and this has been a great effort in that, of course, by cataloging all this signs, this discourages any participants from putting up new signs and feeling that they can feel confident they can sneak them in, perhaps apply some state law to try to keep this sign. So this program's been valuable in providing this information and assisting our efforts to rebut things such as the state code 5216, a rebuttal presumption to say that that sign was there for longer than 5 years. So currently in the report, you'll see that we have some summary data, and the report reflects that we have 525 billboard structures that have no permit record. Now, the great majority of these we have them in our database as under the Business Press Codes 5216, which is this rebuttable presumption. We would need to do some extensive, a great deal of extensive research to see if there was, going back in the historical records, check spacing from other types of signs, to see if, in fact, we could rebut this presumption and say that it was not lawfully erected. That's why we were looking for additional staff to complete this effort and possibly find some of these signs within this 525 that could be pursued through enforcement. There's also, the report reflects there's an additional 391 that have permits, but they've been altered from the conditions of the permit. So we have taken a number of actions on these signs, but there again, the OSPIP doesn't fund that kind of an action, so we've been using our general funded sign enforcement staff, which takes complaints on all signs throughout the city, not just off-site signs, but the thousands and thousands of on-site signs as well that are throughout the cities and create numerous complaints. So of course, this staff would also assist us to take actions on those 391s as well. So that's what we're suggesting in our report, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Great, thank you. We'll have some questions right now. My first question is whether or not we adopt a sign in ordinance and when we adopt it and when its implementation date is. We have some real needs out there now for more enforcement on existing signs, and we can imagine a scenario that when a new sign ordinance goes into place, there's going to be a lot more work. Is it possible to say that by January of 2017 that you will have an enhanced enforcement program in place, whether or not whether or not we have the sign ordinance, correct?
Well, currently our funding is for the staff that we have. So, and of course, our funding is, we've been challenged just to, for instance, these 391, to take action on these 391s because of lack of resources. So unfortunately, without some additional funding for resources, I don't really understand how we can enhance. That's for the purpose of our suggestions in this report. Those two BMI's inspectors would of course assist with that effort that you're referring to.
Okay, so we're not in a position right now. Let's say we do pass the sign ordinance. We wouldn't be in a position to have an enhanced enforcement program because of resources. Is that what we're saying?
Good afternoon, Councilmember Jason Kleen, Office of the City Administrative Officer. What we could do for the Department of Building and Safety is something similar to what was done for the Department of City Planning. We could actually authorize resolution authorities without funding, such that the department would have available building mechanical inspectors should the policy decision be made to move forward with either enhanced enforcement and or a sign program. What we could do is work with the personnel department to get those positions allocated, and then the department would have them available should they need to fill them in the future. And then identification of funding for the positions could come forward in a financial status report later this year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any other questions for building and safety at this time? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Now we hear from the CAO, and the CAO's part of this report pertains to our potential off-site sign mechanisms. This is a key issue we have yet to resolve. CEO, can we hear from you now? Thank you.
Once again,
Actually, before you start, I just wanted to ask you a quick question on your last comment. Obviously, if we put it in the FSR, it would have to be based on a new revenue stream. Is that what you were alluding to?
correct, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, Jason Klein, Office of the City Administrative Officer. The first thing we'd like to clarify is the attachment to the report. The attachment to the report was intended to present a list of options to the Council Committee. As you know, if we are going to move forward with a relocation agreement strategy, it would be important to identify what options are available under that relocation agreement strategy. So the intent when we said, the baseline would be 8-1, would be that's where the discussion starts. The City Planning Commission left it off as 8-1. A developer or a billboard company would be allowed to submit a relocation agreement that recommended a takedown of 8 square feet of static sign for every 1 square foot of digital sign that would go up. However, there would be other options available to them. They could make a recommendation that has a 6-1 takedown ratio, a 4-1 takedown ratio. However, as the takedown ratio is reduced, the city would get a greater share of the revenues generated from that new digital sign. As part of the analysis, we looked at takedown ratios from 8-1 all the way down to 2-1. We understand that any takedown ratio that the city would consider would have to provide for at least some kind of significant reduction. We qualified a significant reduction as 50% and or more. And all of the takedown ratios assume that at least half of the takedown would be required in the area in which the digital sign would be relocated.
Does that conclude
Yes, sir.
your presentation? Okay, any questions or comments for the CAO? Yes, Mr. Englander.
So, first of all, I'm trying to figure out how you came up with these numbers. The 8.1, the 8-1, I understand. But the 6-1 or the 4-1, it could have been, is that just random? It could have been 3-1, 5-1. What do these represent?
We actually looked at all of the relocation agreements that cities have enacted throughout the state. So there are over 35 cities that actually allow for relocation agreements. So we looked at what other options they had, with the understanding that cities such as Victorville and Bakersfield and San Jose and San Diego, although they're comparable in terms of, municipal government, nobody compares to the city of Los Angeles. Nobody has the population that we have, the marketing, media, entertainment capital of the world. Right. They don't have the geographic distribution of signs, the major thoroughfares throughout the city, and everything else that goes along with the city. So what we were looking at is trying to actually identify a unique way in which the city could leverage its uniqueness, but also protect the existing sign ban, which was our number one priority.
In looking at and trying to extrapolate some of the revenue share formulas that you have on here, what are those based on, and how do you formulate such an equation to suggest that, as an example, at 8-1, the city will receive 0 revenue? How is that? Where did that come from?
So an 8-1 takedown ratio would be unique within the state of California. Effectively, you would be looking at leveraging the takedown ratio of above and beyond any other public benefits the city may see. The 0% isn't fixed. However, it was just the starting point for the analysis. So what we were doing with the other takedown ratios, the reason why we didn't put an actual percentage there was effectively working with the council and the city attorney's office as to whether or not a specific revenue goal was achievable. You see revenue somewhere between 5 and 10%, up to 50%, depending on where the digital sign is located. However, we didn't want to lock ourselves into a concept of, if we do this, therefore we'll get this amount of revenue. Those types of things need to be vetted by the city attorney's office before we present them forward, and there are a number of options and variables that we're vetting with them currently.
Okay, so this could easily just be, this could be a 5-1. This could be any other number. These are just ranges that you started off with a baseline or a floor of Because 8 was mentioned, started there saying that would yield no revenue. And I'm assuming that's because the board companies themselves that took the 8 down are going to lose revenue on 8 boards to exchange for 1 digital. It's sort of a wash.
Correct.
Is
So
what you're suggesting.
in looking at what has happened throughout the country in terms of digital signs, typically a billboard company would expect to see a 4 to 12% increase in revenue from the conversion of a static sign to a digital sign.
Got it. That's the formula I was looking for.
It's
Okay.
going to vary widely depending on the area and the market saturation and everything else. A sign in Hollywood is going to be a lot more marketable than a sign,
Right.
in Porter Ranch.
Right. Okay. What are you trying to say about Puerto
Just
Rico?
trying to say we're going to have to put some more signs up along the 118.
I represent that. With that, speaking of that, and I'm glad you brought it up because it really went into my next question on location. And you'd mentioned I wanted to hear a little more about what this means. You said half from the area takedown and the other half not. And so if we were on hypothetically an 8-1, we'll call it a 4-1 because 8-1 isn't even worth my conversation that there's no revenue and nobody's ever going to do it and it's not going to happen, then it's a moot conversation and it's worthless legislation. But whatever that number might be. And so for hypothetical purposes, we'll say 4. So that would mean they would have to take 2 down in my district and 2 down outside of my well, not my district, but a signed district. Walk me through that.
They would be allowed to take down half of the required square footage within either a geographic radius around the relocated sign, and potentially, if we can verify the legal defensibility of it, allow for that to happen within the council district. Typically, we want something to be very cut and dry. It's definitive. You can do this and or do that, and we take away the discretionary action from that.
Right.
It could be perceived that if it was the geographic radius or subject to the approval of a council member, that now we're changing the conversation from something that is ministerially and objective to something that could be construed as discretionary, which we're trying to avoid.
Right. I like the idea of avoiding it, but one of my concerns too is I have the least amount of signs citywide, I believe, in my district. And with that, though, we still have many that we want gone, and they're in less than desirable locations on some of these boards. And I've talked to many folks over time, both neighborhood council members and HOA members and the like, who would much rather have, in certain locations, a digital if they knew it was going to take down a certain amount of boards. The unfortunate part of that, well, it's good and bad, because we have the least amount, it's much harder for these equations to fit in and shoehorn in, even taking 2 down, for example, if it was a smaller geographic location. Are there other geographic boundaries without adding a discretionary element? Because I agree we shouldn't have that. Are there other geographic boundaries? I wouldn't maybe go as far as waste or watershed, but are there other sort of boundaries that we could look at or explore that would make sense?
There are a number of boundaries that could be looked at. However, the goal of allowing for, or basically requiring half the signs to come down in the area where the sign was relocated is to, mitigate some of the community impacts that may be perceived from the digital signs going up. However, the other half of the takedown isn't required to happen anywhere in the city. It could, in fact, happen in and around the digital sign that's going up. I mean, really, it's trying to create a framework that incentivizes the billboard companies to participate in a takedown program,
right,
and would ultimately allow for signs to come down in areas where there's not a lot of signs, whether it's, in the San Fernando Valley or if it's in South LA, by giving the sign companies kind of the opportunity to identify what signs come down outside of that immediate area. You're really banking on the fact that underproducing signs that don't provide for a lot of revenue are ultimately going to get taken down. And a lot of that's going to be based on, how many vehicles are in and around the area, how many people are going to view that sign at any given point in time, whether or not it's in a residential neighborhood, what are the operating conditions associated with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. With that, I think that's all I've got for now. But
Thank you. Mr. Harris-Dawson?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and appreciate the questions from you, Mr. Englander. Helped shed a little light on this, and the great reports. feel like there's been a lot of response since our last conversation about this. Had more questions about takedowns, sort of following up on the concerns that Councilmember Fuentes raised, and I think apply to the 8th District and other districts as well, about there being relatively few opportunities for sign districts, but a lot of need for takedown. And so it looks like this policy addresses that, so it lets half be taken down outside the sign district. I wanted to hear more about what that means in real terms. So you said it could be outside the city. I mean, is it as wide open as it reads, or are there other sort of unspoken requirements that are there?
The only constraints were on the first half of the required takedown, which would require it to either be taken down within a 5-mile geographic radius of the relocated sign, or potentially within the council district that the new sign is going to be placed. The rest of the takedown could be done anywhere in the city.
And that would be at the discretion of the sign company?
Correct, sir.
And can a company qualify or meet the takedown requirement with signs that they do not own?
No, sir. The sign company would have to offer up signs that were actually under their direct control. There's going to be a permitting process associated with this, the demolition of existing signs, the reconstruction and or relocation of other signs. The newly created digital sign will become part of the OSPIT program. We're going to have, inspections and code enforcement and other things that the Department of Building and Safety are ultimately responsible for managing. There's probably going to be a component where the Department of City Planning is looking to ensure that any of the time, place, manner, and or zoning requirements for the placement of these signs is achieved. City Attorney's Office may have to look at each individual agreement to ensure that it meets the city's standards and there aren't any outstanding legal issues, but the sign company would have to own the signs. What we've seen, though, is signs have a tendency to change hands for a multitude of reasons. What we anticipate seeing is smaller sign companies that have a smaller inventory may ultimately offer up and or sell their signs to some of the larger companies to basically give the larger companies an inventory of lower revenue generating signs that could otherwise be used and taken down to participate in a relocation agreement structure.
I'm sorry, say that last part one more time. So you're saying larger sign companies would acquire smaller sign companies?
It's not uncommon for sign companies to purchase signs from other either sign companies and or purchase smaller sign companies. So City of LA is unique. There are some signs out there that, grandma and grandpa erected to generate some, additional revenue and retirement that are sitting there in front of an apartment complex that really have no place in the current city. However, we don't have the ability to compel them to take it down without compensating them for that sign, but it really doesn't generate a lot of revenue. If you were a larger sign company and you could use that square footage as part of a takedown ratio to allow you to erect a digital billboard somewhere else in the city, you may want to purchase that sign and offer them some money, whereby allowing for that sign to ultimately come down and for you to meet your business goals outside of that area.
So, just to make sure I understand this correctly, so for instance, in my district, there are a lot of churches that sometime in the 40s or 50s put billboards on top of their buildings and they rent them out. They don't do a lot of revenue now. They'd have the opportunity to sell their billboard to another company that had a takedown requirement that they wanted to achieve, and that would qualify.
Well, they would sell their sign to another company, and then once that company had acquired the sign, they could then offer up that sign as part of a relocation agreement.
I see. And there isn't, is there a way to sort of short circuit that? So to say, company X is going to pay this church to take down the sign so they don't have to go, so the companies don't have to go through a change in ownership?
The physical property
just to make it faster.
I'll ask the city attorney about the specific question about the process for how the signs could change hands and or whether or not, the process could be expedited if we allowed for them to participate in the process prior to the sign being acquired by another company.
And just so I'm super clear on this, the same principle would apply if a smaller company could approach a larger company, right? So if I'm a sign company and I have 100 signs, and so I can't really afford to take down 8, I could approach a company that has signs all over the place, plenty to spare. Under this proposal, I could approach that company and say, I'll buy a dozen of your signs that don't generate revenue and
Yes, sir.
qualify for a takedown. That wouldn't be disallowed.
It would not be. And to your point, I mean, that was part of the reason why we wanted to offer lower takedown ratios would be to allow for sign companies of all sizes to actually participate in a relocation agreement program whereby they could offer up, a 2-to-1 takedown ratio. However, the revenue that would be split between the company and the city would be higher than if you were using one of the higher takedown ratios.
Got it. Thank you. I've got nothing further, Mr. Chair.
Follow up from that. Thank you. That is interesting perspective on that. I'm assuming, and Herman, if you make another sound, you're going to be asked to leave. I'm assuming that that these have to be legally and permitted signs for the takedown, correct? Because I want to make sure that when Mr. Hathaway writes about this, since he gets it wrong most of the time, that he hears it clearly, that in fact they would have to be permitted and legal signs as part of this.
The report is silent on that. So that becomes a policy decision. There's always been the discussion of what do you do about the 500 and so signs that fall under rebuttable presumption. Right now, we don't have the evidence to compel them to take down the signs and or modify them to how they were previously permitted. Right. Having worked with building and safety very closely for the last 5 years, they've really scrubbed the records. They've looked at things. At best, there may be 5 or 10% of those signs that we will at some point in time find evidence that meets the presumptions and we can force the companies to do something about them. However, the likelihood is that 450 to 500 of those signs we're never going to be able to do anything with.
Excuse me, can you hold your thought, please? Mr. Herman, you sitting there, you come to every council meeting, every committee meeting that time possibly allows for you and disrupt those meetings. You have been warned already that if you continue to disrupt this meeting by waving your arms unnecessarily, let this be for the record, just in case we are challenged by this, that this is your warning. And any other instance of you disrupting this meeting, you'll be asked to leave, and with no exception. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, if I can just add to that for the record, that it's not us he's disrupting, it's the audience, and we've already gotten complaints as well. So for those in the audience, if you feel that you can't pay attention or you're being disrupted, you can just put your hand up and we'll see it and we'll acknowledge it, that he's doing that. That's not you, Mr. Herman. You're the one causing the disruption. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Please.
Going back to the rebuttable signs, if there's an opportunity to take them down, the city should probably strongly consider that opportunity, and one of those opportunities is to allow for those signs to be part of these relocation agreements. It would expedite the takedown of signs. It would save staff time in trying to research records and find evidence that may or may not exist. It'll save the city attorney's office numerous hours trying to actually compel them to bring them down through the legal process. So if the goal is to take down those rebuttable signs and or get them permitted, the council should strongly consider allowing them to participate in a relocation agreement.
Does that align specifically with the last city attorney opinion on that then?
Well, the city attorney says that we don't have to grandfather them into the program, and we can always look and continue to look for rebuttable evidence, and we can look to, compel them to bring them down. However, if you wanted an expedited way to bring some of these signs down, it would be to allow for those signs.
So we have some options to do both.
I believe so, sir, but we will ask the city attorney's office to provide additional information.
Thank you.
Thank you. One other question, just to go through the numbers with me, is the report suggests a 150 cap. And if we take the ratio of 4 to 1 that we can replace, how many signs can we realistically take down from that?
If you were using a 4-to-1 and it was capped at 150, the maximum number of signs would be 600. So you'd go from 5,600 and change to about 5,000 and change.
5,000 and change, okay. And in your thinking about this or writing this, your section of the report, would the cap at all affect the areas that are disproportionately affected by the overproliferation of signs at this time?
There's a strong likelihood that signs in poorer areas of the city that don't generate as much revenue would get taken down. However, you're not going to see the opportunities to take down a significant number of signs in those areas because it's unlikely that if a company had to choose between Hollywood and an area of the city where a digital sign wouldn't do as well, they would probably stay away from the sign. They would probably go to the areas where they're going to generate the maximum amount of revenue for that investment. Conceptually, from the CAO standpoint, we were looking at a cap as a way to protect the city from arguments that the city was actually trying to monopolize their position with digital signs. 150 site cap should be sufficient for city properties, but it probably wouldn't actually work for a relocation agreement structure, especially if the intent is to take down a significant number of signs.
Great, thank you. That was helpful. Thank you very much.
Every time you guys ask great questions, it just opens up more questions.
Right.
So that's what I was looking at, is the cap and where that number came from. And so that's a suggestion, because I don't remember that in any conversations, but so that's a suggestion based on city properties.
Well, the conversations that the CAO and CLA had was on capping the number of properties that the city could actually erect digital billboards on, because we don't want to have somebody argue as to whether or not the city is trying to monopolize the business and or encroach on the private sector.
Right, but okay, so I know I missed that part in the report. So the cap is only, the suggested cap is only pertaining to city-owned properties.
No, he just suggested that as a possibility.
As a possibility.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Got it.
Yes, Mr. Stockton?
So a little more clarity on this. So no one should read this and understand that at the end of it, there will only be 150 digital signs in Los Angeles.
If the council chose to cap the number of digital signs, that would be a policy decision. There are a lot of things that go along with how you would determine what the appropriate cap number would be, how you would distribute those signs. Are you going to do it as a percentage of the inventory that a company currently has? There are a lot of things that have to go into it. Setting a cap at the phase one number of years may make sense to limit workload coming in so that the city can ensure that everybody has an opportunity to participate. However, if the city does want to see a significant reduction of 30 to 40% of the static billboards currently in the city, a cap of 150, of 200, of 500 are not going to achieve those goals most likely.
But just so I understand correctly, no citywide cap has been proposed here, and none of the questions that you just enumerated have been contemplated in what we have in front of us.
The report does not include any formal recommendations, sir.
And I just want to also add just one thing to that. From my looking at all of this, it's virtually impossible for anybody, or certainly the city, but any of us, to run any type of algorithm where we can apply the filters that are being suggested, where it was even on a 4-to-1, and where it was 2 in the area, 2 outside the area. They had to be so far away from a resident. They had to be all the filters that are being suggested, and there are many. To how many city properties would even be available, and what types? And once you apply all of those, it would be almost impossible to say what the maximum, even if we wanted to achieve that, could be. I mean, there's no real way to determine that. We just don't have that information readily available, and certainly our GSD and real estate department don't. There's no way to filter all of that.
I mean, one of the things planning has been very, very good at is taking the sign location data that building and safety has and actually mapping out where those signs are in the city.
The existing ones, right?
Correct.
Right.
And then you can do an overlay to see where they would be allowed under any number of zoning regulations the city would apply. And to that point, we could do the same thing with city properties. I know for the safe parking program, planning is working with us to get the GIS overlays from Navigate LA to look at where DOT parking lots and city-owned parking lots are in all our buildings.
Right.
So we could plug that information into the map to see how many
sort of
lots and or facilities would fall into that.
But then you'd have to really dig down deep and do a few layers to figure out, well, how many are near residential neighborhoods, or you'd have to get into all the other filters.
Correct, sir.
At that point.
You know, to the extent it would be helpful if we requested the city attorney's office to look at what limitations the city is required to place on ourselves in terms of, you know, creating and erecting these signs. What the city of Chicago did was basically they had a request for proposal process that allowed for those digital signs to be erected, and then you have somebody manage those signs on behalf of the city and you split the revenue. So the next recession that we have, you know, it may be beneficial to allow your zoos, your libraries, your rec and parks, and other facilities the opportunity to put those digital signs on to ensure that constituents continue to receive programs that they've come to love and enjoy and not have to cut those programs. I mean, it's an option.
All righty, thank you. Does planning have any additional comments on this?
Good afternoon, Tom Rothman from the Planning Department. I just wanted to go over briefly the options that we had set forth for a mechanism that would go into place if we did choose to allow signs outside of sign districts. So first, that was by doing so, that would just not be consistent with what the City Planning Commission had acted upon. But if we were going to do that, we would want to create an incentive for reductions all over the city, and we would like to mirror.
I'm sorry, just so we're clear going forward.
Sure.
Signs outside of sign districts.
Correct.
On publicly or privately held land.
Either one at the moment, but we did choose.
I just want to know which one you're talking about.
I was going to talk about on non-public property.
Non-public property. Thank you.
The private, the public property would be a different mechanism. So we did propose to have many of the same parameters that we have in place, or we have in the City Planning Commission and the City Attorney ordinances. Those types of restrictions, so distancing requirements from single-family zones, historic neighborhoods, scenic highways, certain types of parks, and other types of civic buildings. And we would also like to see distancing between these digital billboards from each other, and then also the same types of general land use designations of regional center, general highway, community, commercial, or industrial neighborhoods. So those would be the general parameters, and then the sign reductions and the revenue generation could come from that. So if you had any questions on that, we would also like to continue the digital display parameters that the City Planning Commission had adopted back earlier this year for all sign districts. We would encourage that to be continued throughout the city if we were to allow signs outside of sign districts.
Thank you. We'll now go to public comment. Each public speaker has 1 minute. Jeremy Diaz, Ron Miller, Nancy Hoffman Van Yek. Welcome.
Morning, or afternoon, actually. Hello, honorable council members, and thank you for the opportunity to address you this afternoon. My name is Jeremy Diaz, and I'm here on behalf of Plumbers Union, local number 78, and our 2,000 members we represent. We come before you today to voice our support for the comprehensive sign ordinance that allows digital signs on both private and public property outside of the current restrictive sign districts. You have the opportunity to support workers and our families by increasing the sign districts to larger and more diverse areas, and we appreciate the work that you've done so far to make this a reality. Bottom line is, if you make sign Bottom line is, if the sign districts aren't increased, you're leaving work on the table, and there's no reason to make that happen. We ask that you take the opportunity today to support LA's workers and communities by expanding the areas that benefit from this ordinance and increase the opportunity for good paying union work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Ron Miller, Executive Secretary of the LA Orange County Building and Construction Trades Council. We're here today to voice our support for a comprehensive sign policy. We feel that the sign districts are going to be restrictive. We feel that we elect you folks to govern. You guys ought to be able to come up with a good policy that benefits the whole city. The sign districts need to be bigger. They need to be able to have the opportunity to put signs outside the districts if it's needed. And enforcement is a part of that. And the city can recoup its costs through a viable sign policy to pay for the enforcement and bring money into the city coffers. So we urge you today to move ahead with a comprehensive sign policy. And let's get going on this. We have agreements that will put many people to work locally. I know today was a day of groundbreaking over in your district, Councilman Weezar. The football stadium broke ground today, so we're getting people back to work, and we don't want the momentum to stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy Hoffman, Roger Mejia, and Carlos Vasquez.
Hello, I'm Nancy Hoffman-Vanyek, and I'm CEO of the Greater San Fernando Valley Chamber, and we represent 400 businesses and 16,000 employees. And we're here today to support the comprehensive sign ordinance as well. Billboards provide an alternative means of advertising and provide business exposure and brand recognition to an audience of people who are always on the move. More than 1,000 municipalities in 46 states have enacted comprehensive sign ordinances allowing for the reasonable and responsible use of digital and traditional signs. Many California cities are among the municipalities that are currently benefiting from the opportunities created by common sense sign legislation. Under the current sign district, no takedowns or reduction of billboards is allowed, but we need all parts of the city to be treated equally. There is the potential of generating tens of millions of dollars in revenue for the city that can be used for street resurfacing, sidewalk repair, public safety, and dealing with our homeless crisis. We request that you pass a comprehensive sign ordinance that allows for a billboard reduction, generate general fund revenues, and allow digital signs outside of the sign districts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Roger Alexander Mejia, and I've been a resident of LA for the last 32 years. I'm here today to voice my support for a comprehensive sign ordinance that will allow our city to manage our billboards and provide much-needed community benefits to neighborhoods like mine. Allowing digital billboards outside the sign districts will allow everyone in the city to benefit from this new ordinance. We will also have the opportunity to secure crucial benefits for a community that could be used to invest in our community's parks, sidewalks, roads, and more. Thousands of cities throughout our nation already have working signs ordinance with policies like these in place, and residents like me are actively benefiting from. It is time for LA to join these cities. Thank you, council members.
Carlos Vasquez, not here. Marianne Buener, Barbara Brody, and Dennis Hathaway.
Hi, I'm Marianne Bevener. I'm the owner-resident of a duplex on the 600 block of North Plymouth, which is down the street from Paramount Studios, south of Melrose in CD4. I support the ban on the digital billboards. I oppose any sign exchange reduction which would allow off-site digital signs. Even when located in a sign district, the digital signs' glare impacts are much further than the 500 feet of the notice that would be sent out outside of that sign district. They shine alarmingly bright most hours of both day and night, maybe 20 hours a day, into our residential neighborhoods. The constant attention-getting or distraction of the rate of digital image change creates hazardous light pollution to individuals and families. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure, there's a question from one of the committee members.
Can you tell us where the signs that you're talking about are?
Where they are?
So you said they shine into the home and all this?
What we were recently with Paramount was presenting a sign district, and the neighborhood and the entire Greater Russia Neighborhood Council were opposing those digital signs based on the illumination and the measurements from those signs into our neighborhood. They are not. So far, have not been approved. They have not happened yet, but we did do the studies with that.
Barbara Brody, Dennis Hathaway.
Before I make my my comments, I would like to answer your question because we had 5 digital signs in my neighborhood when they were permitted under the secret billboard settlement agreement. There were 3 on one corner alone at Santa Monica and Westwood Boulevard. There was one that was in the backyard on Westwood Boulevard of a single-family home. 5 homes, the homes across the street from them and the next block were affected.
Can you start the clock, please? You haven't started the clock. Thank you.
There were other signs next to apartment buildings and condos. We called living next to those signs living in the digital sunrise, 24/7. They were sometimes brighter in the day. The rooms near them strobed so that when the images change, you could actually see the light changing. Curtains didn't matter. The lights changed 24 hours a day inside the house. The yards were like going to a disco lounge and having the circular ball go around. So these are not benign signs just shining to the drivers passing by. They affect the quality of life of the neighborhood and the neighbors nearby 24/7. The buffers, well, they were seen, I have to tell you, some of the signs were seen a half a mile away down the street. You couldn't miss them. And at night, the seniors in the neighborhood talked about the fact that they could not see when they drove. They were blinding their vision of the traffic signals nearby. And some of the lights, the light at National and Westwood, was positioned in such a way that when the traffic signal was red or green and the image behind it was red or green, you could not see the traffic signal at all. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Can I start?
We started the clock. I didn't. We weren't sure if you asked that question. She just said, held your time. But can you imagine if I allow everyone to speak if they hold their time without, and then...
Well, he could ask me the question now.
We're going to give you 30 seconds because there was a question asked, but he should have asked it before you started responding to make sure you... So go ahead, 30 seconds.
Barbara Brady, Westwood, south of Santa Monica Boulevard, Homeowners Association, where we have a lot of experience, which we would be happy to share with the council. This is a new direction that you've introduced today. It needs to go to neighborhood councils. It needs to go to communities. You had a sign ordinance that established sign districts legally defensible. That's the ordinance you should adopt, and adopt it now. And then if you want to introduce this whole new set of concepts about maybe public property, maybe private property outside of sign districts, do that after you pass the ordinance and get something in place that has been properly vetted around the city. Neighborhood councils haven't seen this staff report. The agenda looks like councils came in and weighed in favor of this report when in fact they haven't even seen it. They haven't had the time to agendize it. They don't know what's going on. The people here are Clear Channel sign ordinance folks, and they will happily tell you that they'd love to have digital signs all over the place. Chicago has 34 signs. This city is proposing maybe 150 just on public property. This is banana time. Thank you for your patience.
Ms. Brody, and thank you. And just to clarify, we as a committee and council, a committee, not the council, had agreed to a sign ordinance that we had moved to council. The CPC, the Citywide Planning Commission, in an unusual move that I have rarely seen, kind of grabbed that sign ordinance and redid it along with items that we asked them to review first. There were certain items we hadn't reviewed or they had a chance to review, so we threw those items to them. We had passed a sign ordinance, asked them to give us their report, but they pulled back a sign ordinance that we had thought we had come up with. So because of the change in council with new members on this committee and because the commission had untraditionally moved to usurp an action by this committee, we are here now again. Just want to clarify that. You may agree with it or disagree.
But this is completely different from what even they considered and what you sent back to them.
Now we're taking the whole thing up now. That's
yeah,
what we're doing.
apparently.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dennis Hathaway, Cindy Starrett, and Art Yoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Dennis Hathaway, president of the Coalition to Ban Billboard Blight. Before any programs that entitle new off-site signs are adopted, the city needs to make sure that all out-of-compliance signs and unpermitted billboards are thoroughly researched and proper enforcement actions taken. The fact that this hasn't been done already is not building and safety's fault. They've had impediments put in their way, such as budget cuts and that billboard amnesty proposal, which I hope has been laid permanently to rest. But I know that the department is both willing and capable to enforce the sign codes in regard to those billboards. The public deserves no less than to know that every permitted billboard complies with its permit and that every unpermitted billboard can be shown to have been illegally removed or illegally put up is removed. I urge you to give Building and Safety the resources it needs to undertake and complete this task. Thank you.
Thank you. Cindy Starrett, Art Yoon, and Chris Knott.
Good morning, council members. I'm Cindy Starrett on behalf of Clear Channel Outdoor. We appreciate your leadership for a balanced ordinance that encourages sign reduction for all communities and maximizing public benefits given the city's drastic need for improvements in many areas, including funds for homelessness issues. There are several points in Friday's staff report that we'd like to be clarified, but we very much appreciate the balance that it displays. First, no nexus study is required for public benefits in a relocation agreement. The chart at the end refers to a citywide sign impact fee nexus study. We ask the committee to clarify that's not required. The state law for relocation agreements says this agreement shall be entered into on terms agreeable to the parties, and 35 cities have done that, and the city of Los Angeles is certainly entitled to do that too. Allowing offsite digital on private property is the only way to maximize sign reduction and public benefits, and we appreciate your consideration very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the Commission. My name is Art Yoon. I'm with Film LA. We're a 501c4 not-for-profit, so we're unable to take an advocacy position on the policy itself, but I think it's important as you are deliberating on the policy to understand how it impacts not-for-profits like us. We've had two major public education campaigns since my time in the last 5 years of Film LA. One was to educate the benefits of filming in neighborhoods, and the other was to try to promote AB 1839, the successful effort to get the tax credit passed in Sacramento. In both of those campaigns, we wouldn't have been able to do it without the partnerships of folks like the Outdoor Ad Coalition, which allowed us to get the number of impressions that we wouldn't be able to get at the rate that we got without their support. I mean, to get the similar sort of impressions, we would have to pay almost double or triple in other vehicles. So it's an important tool that we've utilized successfully, and I urge your consideration of that as you deliberate the policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Knott.
My name was called, okay.
Sorry, you are Carlos Vasquez? Yeah, we called you earlier. So we'll call you up again now knowing that you're here again. Okay? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Knott. I'm a local property owner. I've been a Los Angeles business owner for 25 years. Angelino for 48 years. I'm here to represent the small business owners like myself who support the advancement of the sign ordinance. My digital. Who support the advancement of the sign ordinance to allow digital signs on private and public properties outside the sign district. Billboards are an important source of promotion for our business in providing affordable and effective advertising options that allow business to compete in this competitive environment. I'm here to offer my support to the members of the committee and the direction you're heading. I urge you to support the business like mine and the commitments throughout the city by moving forward with a comprehensive plan to expand the sign district and allow digital signs on both public and private property.
Thank you. Jonathan Herrera, Arnold Ahrens, and Angela Gibson.
Good afternoon. Jonathan Herrera from VICA, the Valley Industry and Commerce Association, representing over 400 local businesses and nonprofits throughout Los Angeles. VICA supports sign regulations allowing digital signs on public and private property outside of current sign districts. Digital billboards provide a cost-effective means of advertising for businesses that would otherwise not have the financial resources to promote their business and stimulate the economy. We are always in support of smart policies that give our local businesses the tools they need to thrive in LA, and we greatly appreciate the leadership this committee has shown on this issue. Much of San Fernando Valley is outside of the sign district, and businesses cannot benefit from this program. We urge you to make sure when this ordinance moves forward, the benefits of static billboard removals and revenue generated from digital billboards apply to all of our communities, not just a select few. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Arnold Ahrens, and I just wanted to say something short. And this is important public policy that can reduce the number of static billboards by thousands of units. And as things are, there is no reduction. It's also a potential revenue stream that will help the city in its ever-increasing budget difficulties. And as a resident and third-generation business owner whose business has always been in the city of Los Angeles, I just hope that we continue to make the progress that I've seen today and that we can resolve this issue soon. I've been involved in this for 12 years, and I would like to see it come to a conclusion. And thank you very much for your efforts.
Thank you very much. Angela Gibson, Reuben Gonzalez, and Bruce Rosenberg.
Good afternoon. My name is Angela Gibson with the Greater Los Angeles African American Chamber of Commerce, and I'm here again to continue to advocate for a comprehensive sign policy. In our communities, not only do billboards advertise entertainment, they also tell information about local businesses, and they give good and bad news in our community. We also want to advocate for a comprehensive, fair, and equitable community benefits across the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Reuben Gonzalez. I'm here on behalf of the LA Area Chamber of Commerce. We fundamentally believe that every complex policy challenge requires a comprehensive solution. This issue is no different. We need a regulatory structure here that provides clarity to business, revenue for critical city services, and benefits communities. Specifically, we need a regulatory structure that allows for digital billboards outside of sign districts. This is key. The good news is that we're not recreating the wheel here. This is not a new model. Cities like Long Beach and Berkeley have done this before. We merely need to follow their lead and do for our citizens what they've done for theirs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bruce Rosenberg, out here. Bruce. Stuart Waldman, Dennis Dillon, and Leon Van.
Hi, Stuart Waldman, President of the Valley Industry and Commerce Association. As you know, we have a need to remove some billboards from sensitive areas in our neighborhoods. You have the opportunity to make sure we can do that by allowing digital billboards outside of sign districts on both private and public property. But I need to urge you to make sure that when this ordinance moves forward, it applies to all of our communities, not just a select few. The current ordinance has very limited sign districts that would restrict billboard removals to only a small portion of the city. We must pass an ordinance that will allow 100% of the city to benefit. That's why it is necessary to allow digital billboards outside of sign districts on both private and public property. We can make sure that we're removing many billboards in our communities in exchange for appropriately placed digital billboards. It's a good policy and will be a win-win for our community and business members. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis Dillon. Hello. Leon Van. Are you here, Leon? No, not here? Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Dennis Dillon from MAI Capital Partners. We are property owners here in the city of Los Angeles. We would urge you to support this comprehensive sign ordinance. I knew there was a word there. And allow private and public digital signs to go up and replace the thousands of digital or static billboards in the city. I think one of the more important parts of this is the increased income to the city. Millions of dollars are being left on the table. I've been coming here for 3 years and seen many millions of dollars lost. Obviously, you guys are working very hard on this. I appreciate that. I just urge you to push it forward and get it done. Thank you.
Dustin Batten, George Abrams, Phil Recht.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Dustin Batten, and I'm here on behalf of the Los Angeles County Business Federation, or BizFed, representing 163 business organizations, 275,000 employers, and over 3 million employees across the county. I'm here to express support for the outdoor advertising industry's efforts to work with the city to find a legislative solution for digital signs in the city of Los Angeles. We urge the Planning Commission to consider these 6 items. Support for digital outside of sign districts, support for public and private property options, support for relocation agreements, support for community benefits, protection of single-family residents, and illumination and change rate standards consistent with best practices. We recognize the long history of this issue in the city of Los Angeles and encourage everyone to work with the industry to restore the use of digital signs and craft a policy for the fair and reasonable use of digital signs and in a timely manner. This will ensure that value community partners are able to continue supporting the Los Angeles civic and business community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Digital billboards are primarily aimed at motorists and are a danger to safe travel. They cycle 20 to 30 seconds, and that's a long time for eyes to be off the road. Distracted drivers will cause increase in accidents, injuries, and deaths, and no amount of potential revenue will compensate for the pain and suffering of those injured and killed. And so I hope that you will consider your vote not as an economic one, but rather as a moral and ethical one. And additionally, digital billboards are extremely bright, and they disturb residents for up to a mile away. So I hope that digital billboards should be banned both as an attractive and a public nuisance.
Thank you. Phil Recht, Richard Spices, and Keith Stevens.
Good afternoon. Phil Recht, representing Summit Media. 3 quick points. First, this report suggests a dramatic new approach to digital signs in the city. Clearly, 3 days is not enough time for any of us to seriously vet all the new policy and legal issues it presents. We would just recommend that you not take action today, but instead take the time necessary to really vet those issues. On the merits, whether the takedown requirement is 8, 6, or 4, small companies will not be able to participate. Instead, this will just restore to the 3 largest companies the monopoly they had under the settlement agreements, which Summit took 6 years to litigate to eliminate. If we're going to allow digital signs in the city, we need to come up with a reasonable and realistic way for small companies to participate. Lastly, on enforcement, we agree the city ought to go after companies that put up signs without permits. But we think it's a waste of time and energy to go after signs that were put up with proper permits but that have minor non-compliances. As a result, we just suggest you confirm that sign adjustment applies equally to on-site and off-site signs. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is
Afternoon.
Richard Spicer. I'm here representing the Los Feliz Neighborhood Council, formerly the Greater Griffith Park Neighborhood Council. We have a community impact statement that goes back to December 2008 on file. I'll read partly from that and then a couple other points, please. It's extraordinarily important, as you could see today, to have a sign unit with the planning department, building and safety, city attorney, staff to monitor, enforce, and keep up. Illegal signs definitely need to come down, and the funding necessary to accomplish that needs to be provided. Neighborhood councils and residential associations need to be notified of any proposed sign with the opportunity to comment and get those recommendations to their elected officials.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. There ought to be an environmental assessment on the safety of any sign put up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your nuanced questions earlier.
Thank you. Keith Stevens, Guillermo Torres, Pam Hope.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. Councilman Huizar, you brought up an issue of balance, and I believe that that really is the question here. What are the right number of billboards for a city of 3.8 million people? If you take the 9,000 billboards in the city and divide it out, there's roughly one billboard for every 433 people, or 434 people in the city. That doesn't even count the people that come through the city, so the impact would be there would be even more people for less billboards. As a result of the ban, we've seen at least a threefold increase in the number of empty double-decker buses that are driving around advertising movies, alcohol, whatever. I'm in the business. I don't have a problem with the advertising. I have a problem with driving it off of private property and then having them clog the right-hand turn lanes, the left-hand turn lanes. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Guillermo Torres, and I'm a faith-rooted organizer for Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice. I work very closely with African-American pastors and Hispanic pastors in the South Central LA area. One of the main issues there is unemployment and folks needing jobs. So for that reason, we support a comprehensive ordinance policy, and we urge you to consider the need for good jobs. And as you heard some of the trade people here, this will create jobs, especially for our communities of color that are underrepresented as far as jobs and good jobs that pay living wages. So we urge you to support and to pass a comprehensive policy ordinance. Thank you.
Pam Hope, Rabbi Jonathan Klein, Antonio Sanchez.
Your swastika is really disturbing, disgusting. Sorry. My name is Pam Hope, and I live in Los Angeles in Gil Cedillo's district. I work with homeless people, and I'm an advocate for the poor. I want to urge this committee to please move forward on the ordinance. We have critical services that are not being funded right now, and that monies that we can get from digital billboards and the companies that want to erect them could benefit us. Millions of dollars are being lost in 10 years or more have gone by the wayside with income that we could have had. These services could be good jobs with living wages, more community services, emergency responses on the billboards, public service announcements for nonprofits. It seems like it's not just a financial reason, but this could be used for many purposes.
Thank you.
Hi, Rabbi Jonathan Klein. I want to echo the fact that it's offensive that this man has a swastika on his face. I'm kind of tired of seeing this kind of bigotry. It doesn't make sense. Rabbi Jonathan Klein, as I said, Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice, and I want to just echo some of the concerns about the need to really solve some of the problems in the city and the fact that here's an opportunity, new funding. This is new funding that could come to support deep concerns for this city, especially the homelessness issue that I know has been plaguing so many of you as elected leaders trying to figure out how to make a change. And I commend your efforts. Here's a great way to raise some serious revenue. An 8-to-1 ratio seems a little bit crazy and sort of defines billboards as an evil thing, as if they're a bad thing. They're part of the landscape of any city. We expect an ordinance to pass that will acknowledge the fact that we want business in this city, and we know that it employs people, and these are good jobs, and we care about the revenues that will come to the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Antonio Sanchez, Alex Castaneda.
Good.
Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. Antonio Sanchez, IBW Local 11. So we represent about 12,000 members, working class folks in LA County, and potentially we will be representing some of those folks that are commissioning and decommissioning these digital signs. So a lot has been said already, but we do want to communicate that flexibility is going to be key. We would love to see something that is not too restrictive, that allows for innovation, that allows for more of the communities in LA to benefit from the service. So yes, there are some jobs attached to this, but this is somewhat, there are many big issues. It's a public safety issue, and there's an equity issue. Being from the Valley, yes, there are some business corridors that should be included. Living on the west side, again, the same thing. So we ask you to please move this forward. Comprehensive, flexible, innovative. Thank you.
Thank you. Alec Castaneda, Ms. W.S. Herman.
Good afternoon, council members and staff. My name is Alex Castaneda, longtime resident.
Sir, Mr. Herman, you have been excused, you've been warned, so if our officer here can escort you out, you've been warned about waving your hands and disrupting this meeting, so I'm asking you to leave this meeting. Thank you very much.
Stand up.
Thank you very much. We warned you about waving your hands in this meeting.
Fuck you, Weasel.
For the record, he's still yelling out and disrupting this meeting. He's still yelling out and disrupting this meeting. He's still yelling out and disrupting this meeting. So, thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Still waving his arms and dancing out of the room. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, thank you very much. Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members and staff. My name is Alex Castaneda, longtime resident and business owner in the city of Valley Village, and I'm here to voice my support for a comprehensive sign ordinance that will allow our city to manage our billboard and provide much-needed community benefits. As an event producer, I've had the privilege of working with different cities, and I'm here to say that I've witnessed firsthand the benefits that the city has benefited from, not only from jobs, but from revenues, and this has greatly increased the jobs and the benefits that the city provides. So I encourage and support council to invest in our future and in our city and our community by advancing the language that would provide the benefits that we truly need. Thank you.
Thank you. W.S., Carlos Vasquez, Leon Van. W.S. here? Not here? Okay. Carlos Vasquez. And then Leon Van.
Thank you. Hello, Chairperson Huizar and esteemed council members. My name is Carlos Vasquez. I'm a resident of Boyle Heights and a board member at Homeboy. I'm here to support a sign ordinance. Digital signs create jobs. Digital signs create PSA opportunities. And it also creates a beautification for the city of LA. These sign companies have been very cooperative in helping a lot of the nonprofits with PSAs. And if we pass an ordinance, it will only allow for PSAs and for nonprofits such as Homeboy to continue bringing messages to the city of LA. Thank you.
Thank you. Leon Van. And our final speaker is Richard Martinez.
Good afternoon. My name is Leon Vaughn. I'm a longtime business owner in the city of Los Angeles, and I'm here to ask for your support for a reasonable sign ordinance for the billboards in the city, and as you resolve this issue as soon as possible. By allowing digital billboards outside of sign districts using relocation agreements, the city has the potential to remove thousands of billboards and secure much-needed revenue for ongoing community benefits. Digital and static billboards are important to LA businesses to use for advertising and help attract customers and stay open. Having the signs also means people are working, which is always a good thing. We urge you to move the process forward by working toward an ordinance that brings benefits to all parts of the city by moving beyond limited sign districts. I hope the city will listen to small business owners like myself. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Richard Martinez. I am a resident of Boyle Heights. Been a resident for 23 years, my whole life. Moving digital billboards outside of the sign districts will allow young entrepreneurs like myself to be able to compete in a very competitive world, and makes marketing a little more cheaper for not only entrepreneurs like myself, but mom and pop shops in the neighborhood. So I would urge you guys to look at this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That concludes our public comment portion of the meeting. Any final questions or comments? Seeing none, and this was, I think, a continued conversation that we are having to come up with some policy directives that we would like our city attorney and our staff to undertake. And for now, I'd like to move that we receive and file the joint report from CAO, CLA Planning, and the Building and Safety. Also, too, that the CAO work with the appropriate city departments to prepare a supplemental report to provide additional analysis on the relationship between takedowns and revenue sharing. We'd like to see this report back in 30 days. 3, ask the CAO to work with the appropriate city departments to identify by council district all city-owned parcels eligible for relocation agreement under the planning's proposed land use restrictions, and to have that reported back to us in 30 days. 4, ask the CAO to work with the Building and Safety Department to identify potential resources necessary to implement the enhanced enforcement program starting rollout by January of 2017. Ask that to be reported back in 30 days. And 5, ask the CLA to work with the appropriate departments to identify an application process for relocation agreements, and to ask that to be brought to us in 30 days as well. Anything else? Okay, so without objection, let that be the direction to staff, and we will have those items back in this committee within 30 days. Okay, thank you. Any other items on the agenda?
Public comment, Council.
We have 2 cards. WS, not here, and Mr. Herman. I think Mr. Herman submitted both these cards, WS and Herman. So he has been expelled from this meeting. Thank you. That concludes this meeting. Thank you.